Maybe whoever or whatever is running the show isn't so nice. Maybe he's evil, or mad, or bored, disinterested. Maybe we've got everything completely wrong. Everything. And if we could look through the mask, what we'd see would destroy us.
I feel like horror is such a fantastic genre because there's so many things that scare us, right? There's monsters, there's creatures, there's fear of the unknown, there's dread, there's anxiety. Like, fear has so many ways of making us shrivel up and be miserable. And that's fantastic. Well, one of the brands of fear that I especially enjoy is the feeling of overwhelming dread. And that's exactly what I got from The Fisherman by John Langan. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to be giving a non-spoiler review of The Fisherman. And I'm going to talk about how it made me feel. It made me feel bad. And that makes me feel good. It's the story of a man named Abe. And he's this, like, quiet, solitary man who works as a technical writer in upstate New York. When the story begins, he is recovering from the death of his wife. He's struggling under the weight of this, like, all-consuming grief. And his world just feels hollow, meaningless. He is, I suppose, like the bloke from Up. If you've ever seen that movie, that's him. And now he's sort of like feeling rudderless and just without any clear direction to his life. And so he has decided to sort of retreat into routine and solitude as a way of insulating himself from the world. His grief is the kind that is kept inside and slowly eats away at him. So as a way of distracting himself, Abe takes up fishing, mostly because it gives him a simple, repetitive act that gives him structure to his life and just something else to focus on so that he can just ignore this grief that is taken over everything. Soon he makes friends with another widower named Dan. And by the way, none of this is spoilers. This is all on the back of the book, right? So this is just what the book is about. And Dan has lost his loved ones more recently, and even though Abe enjoys his solitude, he offers Dan to come fishing with him as a way to kind of like help him out through a tough time. They hear about this mysterious fishing spot called Dutchman's Creek, which is this secluded stretch of water that's wrapped up in local legend, and it's sort of tied to this old folklore from the locals and strange disappearances. The setting of this book just worked so well for me. It's all set in upstate New York. The area is surrounded by forests and country roads and little isolated pockets with dark, overcast skies. People are quietly sipping their black coffee, no sugar, in lonely diners. It's just the sort of perfect setting for horror. Sometimes I'd be reading the book and then a scene would happen, just a really simple thing, and I'd put the book down for a second. And I don't know if you ever do this. Do you ever just like put down the book for a second and you just sort of like imagine the setting even deeper? Do you know what I mean? You just you can just hear like the sound of a boat knocking against the dock and like the wind whistling through the leaves. Yeah, I love that. It's exactly that. It's like a really grey day by a lake. What starts off as this quiet tale about two men trying to heal from emotional wounds quickly becomes this haunting story that is eerie and dark, where reality and myth kind of blur together. This book is definitely a bit of a slow burn that establishes character and place before it gets moving. I like that, but not everybody is going to like that. Honestly, I think the slower pace is essential to a story like this, where the fear doesn't jump out at you, but instead sort of like sinks into you. John Langan is known for his thoughtful literary approach to the horror genre. A lot of people would associate him with weird fiction or Lovecraftian horror. He's compared a lot to Laird Barron and Thomas Ligotti, but I think that Langan has a tendency to lean more towards emotion and character-driven stories more than a lot of others in the genre. The book that I compare this one to the most is Gus Moreno's This Thing Between Us. It's got a very similar vibe, and I read them both within a few weeks of each other. That was a pretty heavy month of reading. But both of them talk about grief of losing people that you love, and they are that kind of weird fiction, that cosmic horror, you know? I like both of the main characters for different reasons. So you've got Abe and Dan, who are both representing what I think as very traditionally masculine kinds of grief, where you just can't be expressed. You know, you feel as though maybe, and by the way, I don't think that this is healthy, but I'm just saying it's how a lot of men act. You know, you've got two options. You can either keep it all bottled up inside and never let anyone know that you're feeling anything, or you can just rage and attack the grief and try to kill the grief. So that's the approach that both of these characters are taking respectively. I really connected with Abe. He's one of those characters that you just can't help but root for. He's just good. He's just a good man. You feel the weight of his grief. He's lost something irreplaceable. You can feel how badly he wants to replace that missing piece of himself. But even in the middle of all of that pain, he still has the capacity to look over his shoulder at Dan and think to himself, you know, this bloke really needs my help. I should take him fishing with me. Dan, on the other hand, like I say, he's very different. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and when I was reading about him, he felt like a mirror image of Abe, but kind of like a cracked mirror, where Abe holds everything in and tries to quietly make the best of this awful situation. Dan is like, no, I'm actually going to do the opposite of that. I'm going to make the worst of this situation because this is bullshit. This isn't right. Someone or something is responsible. I'm not going to let this go. And so his grief it just feels much more raw and messy. Like if Abe is an old scar, Dan is a gushing open wound. Having these two talk about their grief is really sad, but it's also fascinating because as a reader, it's going to resonate not because of how personal it feels, but also because of how universally these feelings can be understood. Almost everyone, like I mentioned, has known loss in some form, and The Fisherman explores how that loss can really get its fingers around us and can change us for a while. You know, hopefully not for a long time, but for a while, it can really change us and who we are. And in this book, it explores how that feeling could tempt us. I've spoken a lot about grief and sadness, but obviously this is a horror book. And so the question is it scary? Yes, it is scary, but in a sort of like unsettling way, where it sort of feels as though you're being consumed by an inky black thing. It's the kind of horror that makes you as a person feel small and kind of like the universe has corners that we were never supposed to see, but you've just accidentally stumbled into them, and you just want to find a way back. You just want to go home. It's a kind of psychological torture. One of the most unexpected things about The Fisherman, and I think I can say this without spoiling anything, I actually think it is better to know this about the book going in, and I think you're going to get more enjoyment knowing this going in, is that there is a full-on novella inside of this novel. I mentioned how Dutch Creek is this mysterious place with a strange history. Well, we learn all about that history where suddenly you're deep in a story that's within the story, and it spans generations. The tone and the focus of the story shifts so dramatically that at first, I've got to be honest, it sort of threw me off a little bit. I wasn't expecting to be taken so far back in time or handed a new set of characters that I had to get to know. And I kept thinking to myself, oh yeah, okay, so, they're telling us about the history of the Dutchman's Creek, but hopefully I'm going to get back into the actual story in a minute. And then it just kept going and going and going. And so, yeah, you should expect going into this that there is going to be a full novella. But once I leaned into that and I realized how sort of cleverly it ties into the main narrative, I started to enjoy it quite a lot. It's really ambitious, I think, to do something like that, and it might not work for everyone, but for me, I just thought it added so much texture to the book's mythology. I think the writing style is definitely worth mentioning as well. It leans more towards the literary, layered, and sometimes almost poetic, almost as though you're reading something closer to a classic rather than modern horror. But, it is still genre horror. I just wanted to mention the writing style because, again, it's not going to be for everyone. If you're expecting this book to feel like a Stephen King novel or Nick Cutter, and I love both of those writers, by the way, this isn't going to be that, though. It's reflective, it's lyrical, and a lot of the time it sort of forces you to sit with the atmosphere and the tension. It's not about racing to the end. It's about slowly feeling the cold water rising, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's funny, because when I first read it, I can't remember the star rating that I gave it. I remember liking it, but now that some time has passed, and the book has sort of like lingered in the back of my mind for a bit, I think I like it a lot more. Actually, talking of the ratings, I'm going to give the ratings in a moment, but just before I do that, I'd like to thank all of the Patreon members for supporting the channel. A big thank you to the cult members. A massive thank you to the named men. And an extra special thank you to the quartet. Thanks to you all so much. You all make this channel possible. I really appreciate it. You all know that. I give you enough love in the Discord, don't I? If you like this channel and you'd like to support it and get some perks like metallic paperback journeys bookmark and access to the monthly PBJ book club, then you can find the link in the description box below. All right, anyway, let's do the ratings. Okay, so let's start with the plot. The plot I'm going to give 3.5 stars to. The plot isn't really the strength of a book like this, but rather the feeling that it gives you, So I would say that the novella in the middle has a pretty interesting plot, though. I did like that. Yeah, 3.5 stars, I think, feels fair. Then the characters, I'm going to give 4.5 stars, almost perfect. I really like Abe and Dan, not just for the people that they are, but for what they represent. That sort of the reluctant ways that men handle grief and try to bargain with it. And by the way, when I keep saying men, I know that everyone handles grief in different ways. I'm just talking about in a traditional sense. The setting, I'm going to give 5 stars. Yeah, perfect. Perfect for horror. Maybe my favorite thing about this book is the setting. I really enjoy the haunting surroundings that the characters are operating within, and I love the history and the lore of Dutchman's Creek. Fantastic. Originality, I'm going to give it 4 stars. I like the way that grief and horror and the past and fishing are all sort of intermingled. And overall, I'm going to give this book 4.5 stars. I really, really like this book, and I do think I like it even more as time passes on. Maybe one day it's going to be a 5-star read. I don't know. It's really good. I think I might reread it, I like this book a lot. Can you tell? If you like this video, then you might also like my review of House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski, and you can watch that by clicking up here. Thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and as always, happy reading.